Well, Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Today, I would like to address a very important question, and that is the question, what do you do when you don't know where life and where history are taking us? What do you do when you feel threatened by things that seem so much out of our control? Now, the reason I'm asking and seeking to give you a partial but meaningful answer to the question, of course, has to do with what's happening in the world today. I mean, let alone some shooter who kills 18 people in Lewiston, Maine. You've heard about that, right? Undoubtedly, right? But we have a situation in the Middle East which is really quite challenging. I'm not going to get into it, and we all have our thoughts and opinions about what should be, what we hope would be, what we'd like to be, what we hope won't be. But nonetheless, all of this begs the question, what do you do when you're facing an unknown future in many ways? And so I would like to provide an answer to that question, and the answer is this. I'm going to give it to you up front, but then we're going to explore it together. You embrace the hero's journey. It's the answer. You embrace the hero's journey. And I would like to explore that journey with you as we think, first of all, about Avram, who became Abraham. And you know the story. I'm not going to go through the whole thing, of course, but we have in our Parsha this week God's call of Abraham, and Vayomer Adonai el Avraham, Lech L'cha Me'eretz Lecha, from your land, from your family, and from your father's household, and go to the land I will show you. And I appreciated Dave's comment a moment ago that we all belong to one another here in the sanctuary, and so when we have certain people up reading the Torah, we're all in the participation of that act. Well, that's true through time as well. We're related to Abraham. And in a sense, his journey becomes our journey, and that's where we're going. Now, the hero's journey has been recognized as having certain common elements, and the hero's journey shows up all over the place in so many movies about the person, the man or woman, who sees something that they need to act on, and they're called to do something so incredibly difficult, and they embrace the challenge, and they go, and it's really, really tough. And they make mistakes along the way too. But there's a promise of making a difference and solving a problem, righting wrongs, and I don't even have to enumerate the names of movies you've seen them. Movies, literature, because this is what they call an archetypal pattern. It's kind of hardwired into the human experience. The archetype of the great hero who does difficult things for a reward, suffers along the way, but then accomplishes great things. And so when we think about Abraham, or Avram, at this case, before his name is changed to Abraham, when we think about him, we see elements of the pattern right here. I mean, God calls him and asks him to leave everything that is familiar and take this long journey. And he doesn't tell him where he's going. And there's loneliness embedded in that command and in that call. Loneliness, to leaving everything familiar, going to a place you don't know, among people you don't know. And it's scary. And there are physical dangers which he encountered along the way. And during those physical dangers, the best hero stories are not hero stories where everything goes right. As a matter of fact, your own weakness becomes evident to you as you travel the hero's journey. And in this case, we read, or in one case, we read of how, because he was scared of Pharaoh, he said to his wife, to Sarai, listen, if you're a great looking woman and listen, just tell them you're my sister because I'm going to be killed if they know you're my wife. I mean, would you call that one of the high points of Abraham's life? No, I don't think so. And so we're struck by his courage, but we're struck by his humanity as well and how he makes mistakes along the way. And so, there are moral ambiguities, and this is, I think, is one of them that faces the hero. And there's challenges to the heart. I mean, think of Abraham at the Akedah, which we've spent a lot of time discussing during the high holidays, especially Rosh Hashanah. And the Akedah is where God calls him and says, I want you to sacrifice this kid who you love, your one and only son who you love, that is Isaac, Yitzchak. I want you to sacrifice him as an olah. That's a burnt offering that goes up in smoke. And I want you to do it on one of the mountains in an area, and you'll find out more about it when you get there. But I mean, we're talking about the hero's journey being filled with challenges, and this is a challenge of the heart. But of course, the hero's journey ends with great reward. And so in our passage today, where God initiates the journey, where he tells Avram to go, I'll quote the scripture, I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you, and I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing, and I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse, and all the peoples of the earth will be blessed through you. Phenomenal ending. Great. Abram called, the first Jew, called to become Avraham, the father of the Jewish people, but in another sense, the one through whom his people and he would bless all the peoples of the world. It's a phenomenal reward at the end of the journey. So we're talking about the hero's journey, and I want to turn to something which I haven't discussed with you much before, but that is, I believe our synagogue has been on something of a hero's journey. I'd like to show you some pictures, and if there's any way to dull the lights a bit, that would be great, but if not, that's okay. So take a look at this picture and tell me who these people are. Not Abraham. Okay, we know that. It's Gary and Betsy Halzel with baby, I believe it's baby Zach, right? The young Gary Halzel. I have things to tell you about him in a few minutes, but first we need to get into the story. Now, this next picture has three parts, and at the top, you may ask, who is that bar mitzvah boy next to the tall guy? Who do you think that is? It's me. That's right. I was 29. This was our first cantor, Baruch Selwitz. And I remember after the first service of Ruach Israel that he attended and I attended, he had come to help the congregation. He was living in Connecticut at the time. And on the way home, because of just what we were at that point, I remember sitting in his little Plymouth car, and he said, we had moved with baby David and with little David and Julie, and where we moved, but our stuff was in transit, our possessions. And Baruch says to me, are you sure you know what you're doing by moving here? Do you want to do this? That's true. And I said to him, I remember it very vividly, I said, we are here and we're gonna give ourselves to this, and that's all there is to it. And that's true. Okay. Now let me introduce you to this guy on the left. This is Pastor Art McPhee, a wonderful man, and he was the pastor of the Good Shepherd Christian Fellowship, and he and I met together, quickly became friends. He had a small congregation meeting in another town, and we were meeting at the Howard Johnson's in Newton. That was the name of the hotel right at exit 17 in those days. I don't know if it's still exit 17, but anyhow, and we knew we had to move. And the cause célèbre was that our sound equipment, and by the way, in those days, everything the congregation owned fit on one of those carts that you get at a hotel to take your luggage. Everything, including our sound system, including the operator. No, not the operator, but the sound system. But sadly, someone had taken a knife and carved swastikas in our sound system, and we knew we had to get out. The place had other disadvantages, which I won't get into right now. But Art and I met, and we began dreaming about possibly buying an existing facility or perhaps building something together. Well, one night in the late 1980s, I get a phone call. We had Friday night services, not Saturday morning in those days. And it was Art McPhee, and he said he had found land in Needham, 1.78 acres. Do you want to go for it? And the phone was shaking. And, that seemed like, wow, this is taking on a reality which up to that point had been just utterly theoretical. Long story short, we were able to purchase this 1.78 acres. So many stories about the house that the guy who lived here, an eccentric electrical engineering professor who lived in a house that would make Jed Clampett's first house look like a mansion. I mean, really, there was no indoor plumbing. It hadn't been remodeled, in 75 years. It was really quite something. And he would raise peacocks and flowers. Yeah, peacocks and flowers. A real eccentric guy. But we managed to get the property, and we presented our plans to the building committee in Needham, and they were flatly rejected. And where normally building plans, you could come back to the zoning board within a couple of weeks and make whatever changes they required, and then you can go ahead. Well, they would not allow us to do that. And we had to wait 2 years before we can even come back. It was really, really prejudicial. And we had people who were against us. But before I get to that, turn to this next picture. Messianic movement baffles tradition, and take a look at that picture. Do you see that picture? Who do you think those people are? Well, the guy who just led the Torah service is about 12 or 13 years old at this point. There's Sue and Julie, Dan, and Joel, who's right at the front here, who now has his own little guy who's, it's very gratifying. But there you see the building finally going up. And I want to tell you how this came about. How it came about was that this land became available. And we had to go, the leaders of the congregation, myself and a couple of others, had to go to the members and say, do you want to do this? It's $201,000. Call that $603,000 now, or thereabouts, I mean, with the rate of inflation. And I remember talking to the people, and the room was quiet, and you could feel the ambivalence in the room until a critical moment when a hero stood up. None other than the young Gary Halsell, and I will quote him. He said, and you can ask him if I'm quoting accurately, he said, "We've got to get this land. If I have to, I'll carry the boulders on my shoulder." And the room just lifted. And the vote came, and it was, I believe, unanimous. We're going to go ahead and raise the money necessary for this building. A step along the way when a hero stood up and facilitated. We would not have this sanctuary today. We would not be here if it wasn't for, in God's providence, that wonderful moment. Well, we started working on the building, and again, this picture, you see in the background, there's my family, and we started working. Mennonites came up from all over. We had Messianic Jews coming from around the country to help. We built, my father actually did the stud work right over there behind the piano, and it was an amazing moment for someone who despised everything, every religious thing that I stood for at that point. It was really a wonderful moment. Well, The problems continued. We finally won a 4-year legal battle against the Count of Needham. And we were told by a sympathetic policeman, you will never build your building, ever. They're going to wear you down financially. They're going to wear you down emotionally. You will not build. And keep in mind that since the founding of the town in 1711, there had never been a situation where a zoning board lost a zoning case. Never, not once. Well, we won. And I wish I was not able to find the article, but it's as real as can be. In the article, in one of the two, there were two Needham papers in those days, and it said, amazing case, higher power rules in church's favor. And we liked that. We thought so. But the problems weren't over. Because if you'll turn to this, actions of a few should be condemned, it's the next picture. This is an editorial piece, Needham Opinion, complaining about the bigotry against us expressed in the towns. That window had bullet holes in it. I don't remember if they were 22s or if they were BB guns, right through that window when we finally built that part of the building. Fire was started on our property. There was we had anti-Semites across the street, and we even had elements in the official Jewish community sending their kids with petitions to not allow Ruach Israel into this place. It was really quite something. We had everybody against us. But the long and short of it is we won, we dedicated the building, and you can put Gary's picture up again. He was our hero at that point. Now, why do I mention all this to you? Well, partly because many of you are new and you don't have much of a sense of the hero's journey that your synagogue had been on from its very beginning. And of course, things are much calmer now, and we have a very amicable relationship with Needham, and things are radically different 30 years later, but anyhow. Now, I want to suggest that at this difficult moment of history, the only thing we can do, corporately and individually, is to embrace the hero's journey. And I want to tell you how I would suggest to you that you do that. We don't know what's coming down. I certainly do not want to get into the geopolitics right now, but I will say this, it is scary stuff. It's scary stuff. Really scary stuff. And we know God's ultimate promises to Abraham and the nation that flows from him, our Jewish people. But we also know that the twists and turns of history can have some very tough moments along the way. So what do you do and what do I do? And we're almost done this morning. Number one, commit to pray for both our Israeli soldiers and the innocent people on both sides. It's very important. It's in fulfillment to Yeshua's journey, and we'll talk about him, the ultimate hero, in just a minute. But he said, love your enemies. Well, what does that mean? Well, it has lots of meanings, but it certainly includes not allowing ourselves the dubious luxury of just praying for the team we identify with, even though it's a wonderful team. No, not good. Pray for your enemies, pray for their well-being, their safety, and that there could be a quick resolution of a problem which could easily get out of hand in the Middle East. So pray, and pray a lot. Pray very specifically for the soldiers that we know, and we know a number of them, and their names are coming up, and we'll make them more available to you if you don't know them. And that's so important. Okay, so number two, keep your emotions in check as you form conclusions as to what is happening. Be careful about the visual images which bombard us. Avoid groupthink as best you can. Now, what are we talking about here? We're talking about the fact that we need to maintain a certain objectivity in the midst of all that's happening. It's not enough just to get filled with rage. We do want to be helpful in practical ways, and Ruach is sending, I think we committed like $4,000 to help with some of the expenses that Israel is dealing with right now, and that's great, and thank you all for your help. But keep your thoughts and motions in check, and be careful not to drink too deeply of the powerful images on TV. I'm not arguing for being naive or unaware. I'm just saying being careful. Be careful so you know how to pray, so you know how to hope, so you know how to believe. It's really very, very important. And third, heroes feel fear. Abraham, I'm sure, felt fear along the way, given the unknowns of his hero's journey. But we don't give in to fear, and nor did he. He kept on keeping on. We keep on serving and meeting and praying and worshiping and helping. During times of pressure, there can be a tendency to cocoon, to become self-protective. I want to argue against that as the best strategy for the hero's journey. We're all on the hero's journey together, collectively and individually. Do not cocoon. Commit yourself even more deeply to the highest things, to the community that you've become part of. And keep worshiping. I so appreciated when Diane came today with that song that was so difficult to sing from a musical standpoint, and yet you entered into it. We were worshiping. We've been worshiping this whole time this morning. Keep committed to worshiping. It's critically important. And last, but hardly least, keep your eyes on Messiah Yeshua, our great hero. Now, I'd like to conclude by reading a verse that Rabbi Nathan called our attention to at last Wednesday evening's board meeting. And he read it without comment. It didn't need a lot of comment, and I'm not going to give a lot of commentary. But you listen and absorb truth about Yeshua, our greatest hero. Now, this is written to some Messianic Jews who were tempted to abandon the hero's journey as followers of Yeshua because of all the complexity and the pain that they faced. Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, in this case, the great heroes of the past who are cataloged in chapter 11 of the book of Messianic Jews or Hebrews. I'll read that again. Since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin which so easily entangles. And let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Yeshua, the pioneer and perfecter of faith. For the joy set before him, the end of the hero's journey, for the joy set before him, he endured the execution stake, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Consider him who endured such opposition from sinners, so that you may not grow weary and lose heart. So in short, let's together embrace the challenges and the blessings of the hero's journey. To all of you, I wish you Shabbat Shalom.